Well, good evening. My name is Cheryl Bryce. I'm from the Songhees community. Chief Ron Sam sends his regrets, and he asked me to come in and do a welcome on his behalf. I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm looking forward to hearing more about presentations and finding a way that I can provide my support. And I wanted to welcome everyone to the traditional lands that we're on, or the Lekwungen ancestral lands, today known as Songhees and Esquimalt. So this is part of our ancestral lands. Pretty much roughly Victoria and Greater Victoria. One of the words for this area is Metulia, is one of our names. And in my whole lifetime, I've never been able to harvest clams in my ancestral lands. The waterway, the shores have just been too polluted. There's a lot of areas within what's now known as Victoria that we can't harvest a lot of our traditional foods. And it's really, really important. One of the things that I really, really work towards is reinstating our indigenous food systems, especially what we call Kwatlau food systems, where our camas grows. Most people might know it as a Garryoke ecosystem. That's one of the things that I work towards reinstating and protecting, and looking at a lot of different ways to create ways that we can work together, whether you're Lekwungen or not, whether you're indigenous or not. And I really feel for the communities that are all being impacted throughout BC, but especially what we're here about to talk about the impacts of the Site C Dam and the impacts it has on the fish, which is another very, very important part of our diet, as well as many other First Nations diet. This is a huge issue, and I think we are here today to talk about such an important thing that's impacting everywhere. My grandma used to say that when something happens, no matter how far away it is, it has an effect on us. So when it's happening up the coast or inland, it has a way of making its way to us, because we all have family connections that link to different areas, and it all has an impact. So thank you everyone for coming and taking time to be here and finding your way to support the peace and other communities.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Linda Mulhall. I'd like to welcome you into this space on behalf of First Metropolitan United Church. I'd like to welcome you to feel at home here. Please enjoy the coffee and the cookies and the water, and don't forget to pick up the pamphlets at the back and to sign the petitions. And also, one important thing, washrooms are over here, out this door, and hang a left. Please, if you need anything, ask any of us sitting at the back or at the tables. We'd be glad to help you. And I'd like to introduce Anna Simeon from the Sierra Club, who will be our host tonight.
Good evening and welcome. There are many things that are in my heart tonight, but I will just offer them here in silence, because I know we have many marvelous speakers who will say them much, much better than I ever could. I would like, without further ado, to introduce Chief Roland Wilson from West Moberly First Nation and Elder George Desjardins. Chief Roland has been a fierce defender of the Treaty 8 lands and people through mining proposals, the WAC Bennett Dam, and now with the Site C Dam. And I hope many of you have seen the media splash that happened yesterday at the legislature. The Globe covered it, TV stations covered it, which is quite rare to see First Nations issues being covered in with such amplitude. And Elder George Desjardins is the keeper of the traditional, ecological, and spiritual knowledge of his people. So they will speak together.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I want to start by thanking the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations for allowing us to be here on their territory. As introduced, this is George Desjardins. He's an elder in my community. He's also a past chief of our nation, and I'm the current chief of it. And we come all the way down here to talk to you about what's going on up there. We've never done this together, and I'm a little out of sorts, so we're going to fumble and bumble through this thing as much as we can.
So this is a first-time act?
George is going to start. He's going to explain the spiritualness of water, and then we're going to tag team the presentation that we have here. Hopefully it works. And hopefully we're here to bring awareness to what's happening. One of the key things that we want people to know is that we're not opposed to the development. What we're opposed to is the unnecessary destruction of this valley. We don't have to destroy this valley in order to make this energy happen. And that's the lie that is being told right now, that this is the only thing that we can do. So, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, before we start, I mentioned this earlier. These little Hershey Kisses, don't eat them. Spit them out.
Good evening. I didn't expect this many people. Pardon?
I'm trying to hide it, but you can see me.
Yeah. Well, don't hide behind me. So anyways, as the chief said, I am George Desjardins. I'm an elder of West Moberly First Nations. And if you happen to question that fact, I have 7 kids, 5 girls, 2 boys. I have 23 grandchildren, 13 boys, 10 girls, and I have 1 great-grandson. And whenever I can, I take them out onto the land and I teach them as much as I can about our traditional ways, plus the other youth in our community. And my children's generation, there's a lot of them that practice our ways today of hunting, fishing, trapping, and gathering. And some of them are really good at it. And I'm happy. At least what I was taught is being continued by the generation behind me. Now I'm focusing on my little ones, my little grandchildren. And sightseeing might get in the way of that. Because we had a bad experience with one dam on the river. It's called W.A.C. Bennett. And it created a reservoir that has a shoreline of 1,770 kilometers long. I'm not sure how many square kilometers it covers, but at its narrowest point, it's 2 kilometers wide. At its widest point, it's 5 kilometers wide, and it's roughly 225 kilometers long. That reservoir killed a lot of animals once the flooding was complete. Whole herds of caribou drowned because they couldn't cross this great body of water because of all the debris that floated in the water from the forest that was flooded. They'd run out onto a floating debris up to 400 meters out, jump and swim across, then couldn't get out on the other side because there was debris on the other side, and they swam until they drowned. And most of these animals that died were caribou, which is the reason why in the late 70s, my elders told us we can't hunt caribou anymore until they can replenish themselves. And that's how come a few years ago, Chief Wilson got a book printed called I Want to Eat Caribou Before I Die. Because nobody from my generation down, and he's part of the next generation. I'm that much older than he is. Yeah, and he can't, they're not allowed to hunt caribou, so none of us have eaten caribou since the 60s, I guess. But anyways, this is what Site C is going to do. Those were the mountain ungulates, caribou, goats, the sheep. There's no more sheep and goats south of the Peace River, or should I say, south of the Peace Reach. What W.A.C. Bennett Dam and the Williston Reservoir, oh yeah, by the way, it's called Williston Lake on the map. It is not a lake. I won an argument with the BC Hydro VP one time over that very issue. I told them if it was a lake, the Creator, God, would have made it. But man built the dam and flooded the land. So man made this body of water. Therefore, it's a reservoir. It's not a lake. And we continued to argue for about 15 minutes, and I won. So now everybody refers to it as reservoir, and I would like to ask you to do the same thing, because it's not a lake. And what W.A.C. Bennett Dam did, Site C is going to do, except on a smaller scale, because it's going to be a smaller reservoir. It's going to only be 83 kilometers long, roughly 2 to 3 kilometers wide. And it's also going to back up 2 major rivers, the Moberly River and the Halfway River, a total of 25 kilometers. So what happened to the mountain ungulates is going to happen to the foothill ungulates, the deer, the moose, the elk. But it wasn't just ungulates. There was bears, there was fishers, there was martens, there was lynx, coyotes, foxes, wolves, wolverines that were found floating in that river or in that reservoir. And BC Hydro never ever, to this day, ever told the general public what has happened with that. And Chief Wilson will talk about it more, but that's where this mercury started, this mercury issue, the contamination of water. And this is basically really what I wanted to talk about, is the importance of water and how we are spiritually connected to it. So everything I talk about here tonight was taught to me by my elders. So tonight, I'm going to be speaking on their behalf. Water is the most important substance on Mother Earth. Without water, nothing can survive, can live. Everything needs water to live. Good, clean, healthy water. And Mother Earth provides us with this water. And the Creator put us humans in charge of it, to keep it clean, to keep it healthy. I want to take a cheap shot at government here. Yeah, I think I will. Government, that's not what government is doing. They're approving projects that contaminates the water at a very rapid rate. And one day there won't be any clean, healthy water left. And it needs to be that way because, you see, water to Mother Earth is like the blood that flows through our veins. Water is her blood. All the rivers, the streams, the tributaries that flow through her body are her blood veins. And they're similar to the veins that we have in our bodies. But the water that flows through our body is called blood. It's the same as hers, actually. So that water has to be kept clean and healthy, or else we will get sick. Very sick, and may even die sometimes. And, you know, we get sick when our water in our systems gets contaminated with toxins and viruses. Well, that's what's happening with Mother Earth right now. As a matter of fact, Mother Earth is sick. She's very sick. And that has been happening for a long time now. If Site C gets built, the water will not be healthy. There'll be mercury, methyl mercury from the trees it covers. There's going to be silt that's going to wash off the banks and float downstream. That river will no longer be a river of water. It's going to be a river of silt. You know, and we talked to BC Hydro and told them the groundwater is going to rise. It's going to weaken those hills. They're going to slough into the reservoir and make that river even more unhealthy than it is now. But they say, no, they're pretty stable hills. Besides, we've made plans in the event that sloughing happens. Well, if you drive from Hudson Hope to Fort St. John, along that beautiful scenic route along the Peace Corridor, if you notice, the hills are all in steps like this on both sides. The reason why they're like that is over time they've been sloughing on their own. All Site C is going to do is loosen them up even more now, especially the North Bank, because that's a silty clay loam. Silty clay loam don't hold well with water. So anyways, I don't know, sometimes I just feel like yelling at the government and tell them, we come from her, people. And that's the reason why we have to mix our blood with her blood from time to time in order to live. Because we are 2/3 water. So we need her to keep us alive, to keep everything alive. You block a vessel or you block a vein, what happens? You can have a heart attack. You can get really sick. They're blocking one of our main veins, especially the ones up north. This river starts on the west side of the Rocky Mountains, winds its way through to Lake Athabasca, where it joins the Slave River to Great Slave Lake, and then the Mackenzie River to the Arctic Ocean. It's a main vein. But I don't know. They don't really get it. I don't know. I just feel like taking them and, we're in the house of God here. I better not. I'm supposed to be a spiritual leader. I lead people in prayers. I shouldn't be doing that here. I don't know. I don't know when or who can really say, but someday soon, Mother Earth's going to die. She's going to stop producing. And we are, as a human race, are going to die also. Everything here is going to die. And these people don't get it. Government and industry don't get it. Especially the Nestle bottling company, the Nestea bottling company. They say humans don't have a right to water. They bottle it and sell it. That's Mother Earth's blood they're selling, and they're getting it for free. Cheap shot at them. So let's boycott Nestle. So anyways, as I told you, I'm a spiritual leader. I earned that title 12 years ago when I completed the Sundance. I can tell you all this because we're in a house of God. And the ceremony I practice in was one of the ceremonies the Creator taught us how to pray our way. So I can tell you that here. I'm a sun dancer. 4 years I danced. And during those 4 years, I earned the right to be a pipe carrier. I earned the right to run a sweat lodge, which is the same as this building, but in our traditional way. It's a place of prayer. But there was one thing I found out during that whole time. In regards to the importance of water and how we're spiritually connected to it. So with everything going on, especially with this proposed Site C project, all it tells me is that nobody in the colonial government of BC or BC Hydro understands how clean and important clean, healthy water is to Mother Earth. And to life itself. But some friends and I put on a 4-day workshop 3 times a year on the importance of water. In this workshop, I can guarantee anyone, by the 2nd day, they will know how important water is to a human being. So I'd like to invite the colonial government of BC, BC Hydro, to come to this workshop. This summer, that workshop is going to happen on June 18th, 1915. It's a 4-day workshop, so that they can see for themselves how important that water really is, and that Site C really doesn't matter. Having good, clean water does. It's just like this banner I wear. See this? Can everybody see this? I wear this for 4 reasons. It's my way of protesting Site C. The band is black because I'm in mourning for the Peace Valley, because they're going to kill that valley. I'm in mourning for all the animals that are going to be displaced there, all the animals that are going to drown there. I'm in mourning for them. I'm in mourning of the cultural genocide that's going to happen to my people. And I'm in mourning for the people that currently live there, that are going to lose a way of life. That's why I wear this. And I want to continue to wear it until this fight is over. Except if we lose, God forbid, and I don't think we will, then I'll continue to wear it. I just need my chief to say when. He knows what that means. Yeah, so I guess what we're trying to say is today, we are trying to inform the people as to what is coming to the Peace Valley, and hoping people will listen and voice their concerns regarding this, the building of this Site C dam that's not needed. And because they have deep pockets, and that's all they think about is filling their pockets. We're going to need a lot of help to protect this mighty river. After all, in 2013, the Peace River was named the most endangered river in BC. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are we on? I see these ones. Are these ones going to be on, or is it just those ones up there?
Yeah.
Can everybody see those ones up there? I couldn't. So, yeah, George was explaining all the stuff that's going on in northeastern BC. Once again, I want to be clear that our nation isn't opposed to development. We participate in the activities that are going on up there. What we are opposed to is the unnecessary impacts that are transpiring up there. What I'm going to walk you through here on my presentation is some of the stuff that's up there. Now, not all of it's got to do with Site C, but it's going to be a continuation of what's going to happen up there if Site C goes forward. The province has been telling people that Site C is needed for 400,000 new homes in BC. That's a lie. Site C is needed for the LNG market that they're trying to get happening, which is all right. Site C is not all right. The industry, to create jobs and stuff, is acceptable. It's the necessity to flood that valley. They have better technology and more efficient ways of doing it. BC Hydro runs dams. They don't want to do anything else. They should change the name to BC Power on that. So on the screen right now is our title, and I just realized that I didn't put George's name on here. I'm sorry about that. I'll do that later. What you see is the Peace River there. The image on the left is the river at high flow when BC Hydro is releasing water, and the image on the right is when they're holding water back. The fluctuations on the river are massive, within meters up and down up there. As long as the river's flow is a caption in the treaty, where this is Treaty 8 territory. It was signed in 1899 on the shores of the Lesser Slave Lake. Our nation, the West Woodland Nation, formerly known as the Hudson's Hope Band, adhered to Treaty 8 in 1914. On
the shores of the Peace River.
Oh, I guess I got... Oh, now it's going crazy. Come on. There it is. So that's Treaty 8 territory. That's the largest, most comprehensive treaties of the historic treaties in Canada right now. As you can see, it goes from northern BC all the way up to Northwest Territories and into Saskatchewan, all the way down almost into Banff there, that little tail that's hanging off the bottom. It's a pretty big chunk. And our treaty rights travel through that whole territory. In Alberta and Saskatchewan, they've been modified a little bit by a government process called the NRTAs, Natural Resource Transfer Acts. But in BC, there is no NRTA in place. So the relationship in BC and the Treaty 8 territory are quite a bit different, is quite a bit different than all the other provinces throughout Canada. This, you're not going to be able to see it, but this is a promise that was attached to the treaty upon signing. And this is the promise that the commissioners had to make to the First Nations to assure them of the integrity of what they were trying to protect would never be interfered with. On the bottom of this thing, it talks about, we assured them that the treaty would not lead to any forced interference. What I'm going to walk you through here tonight is what we consider pretty forced interference. Maybe. Okay.
Oh, no, I was just peeking over.
Oh, do you want to? I'll just keep going until you tap me on the shoulder. This is this is Moberly Lake on the left-hand side before the settlement actually came there. Our people have lived along the shores of Moberly Lake for generations. We've got stories going back over 400 or 500 years there. They've done an archaeological assessment in an area that we were having a little bit of a fight with provincial government over a mine, and the artifacts that they found there date back between 1,000 to 4,000 years, and those are our people that were there. There's a site in Fort St. John called the Charlie Lake Caves. It was at one time the earliest known site for human habitation in North America, going back 11,000 years. We believe it was our ancestors that were in that cave. The image on the right is my Uncle Don. He was a riverboat man on the Finley River. He ran lots of the people, the elders in my family were riverboat men for the Hudson's Bay Company. They ran the freight boats up and down for the Hudson's Bay Company during the fur trade. He looks like he's in trouble there, but he's not bad. LNG is the big talk in BC right now. Everyone knows that Petronas has just offered one of the coastal First Nations $1 billion deal over a number of years, and that the First Nations have turned it down. Christy Clark has banked everything. The Premier has banked just about everything on LNG, and the market has collapsed. And Site C is what she seems to be turning to try and save her bacon up there. We are looking at 4 48-inch pipelines. We've never seen a 48-inch pipeline in British Columbia. They are big. They're hauling pipe up there right now because 3 of the 4 have been approved, and they're getting ready to start. Plus, the one heavy crude oil, the Gateway project, has been approved. They haven't done anything with it, but it has been approved as well. They did the 4 pipelines, the natural gas LNG pipelines, they did that the same month that they approved Site C. It was all done in one shot there, so it slipped under the rug on everybody. Fracked up land. I don't know if anybody knows about the fracking process that goes on with shale gas. What you see on the left-hand side is an actual frack that is happening. They pump the water and the sand and the fluid into the drill hole, and they pressurize it up to about 10,000 psi, and they actually fracture the ground and create little fissions so the gas can flow out on it. Those vehicles, there's about 26 big rig trucks sitting there, diesel trucks that run 24 hours a day with generators on them that power the pressurizing units so that they can keep the hole pressurized. They run 24 hours a day until that's done up there. And sometimes these frac jobs can go up to 6 months up there. They just bring in tankers and they keep filling them up and they keep going. The image on the right is a frac pond. Now these are 3 to 4, sometimes 5 times larger than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. A lot of times they are lined, sometimes they're not lined, they're sometimes just clay-based, and they fill them up, sometimes with fresh water so that they can use it. They store it on site so they could use it. And then when they frack the hole and they pull the water out, the water is full of contaminants and it's poisonous, and they dump it in there until they can figure out what to do with it, and then they leave.
Leave it for the animals.
So, in 2000, we ran a study because our elders were coming back from hunting and they were informing us that they were finding moose. The moose that they harvest, there was something wrong with them. They'd open them up and get ready to process them and take them back, and they would find not normal things in the body cavities, cysts, sores, foul smells. When you're dealing with wild game, you get used to a certain type of smell. And when there's a difference in that smell, you notice it right away. And they would find green fluids in the body cavity, and so they would just leave it and go away. We ran a study in 2004 called the Petroleum Contaminant Study, where we went out there and looked around to see what was happening. We found out that we identified 7 sumps and 13 flare pits. These are things that they use in the oil and gas patch out there. We tested them, and 75% of those sites were contaminated above and beyond federal provincial levels. In order to be registered as a contaminated site, they had to exceed both the federal and provincial sites out there. The animals such as moose, deer, elk, geese, ducks, bears, coyotes were accessing these sites, and they were eating the fluid, drinking the fluid, and eating the soils in the ground that were contaminated. we raised this, we brought it forward. They were supposed to actually fence these sites off, but we found out very quickly that BC actually, and the OGC, the Oil and Gas Commission, don't know how many sites are out there because they didn't keep track of these things. We actually had to go back to them with GPS coordinates and tell them this is a site here and this is a site here. You need to look at these sites and take a look at them. That was in 2004. So this is one of the big arguments that the OGC had, Oil and Gas Commission had, and the province was that, well, you can't prove that the animals are drinking this water and eating the soils. So we went out there and set up cameras. And this is the $1 million shot that we got. This is about a 4-year-old, 3 to 4-year-old young bull, got his head down. This is actually the most contaminated site that we had found up there. And he's drinking the water out of that site. And this is how the sites are. They look like just an open field. You know, you wouldn't even notice that they were a site until you went and actually checked it out and knew what you were looking for. You would then understand that this is a lease site. So the nonsensical thing of this is that we have told them, fence these things off, keep the animals out of there. So the site on the right is an actual site. This is not to belittle Shell up there, but they fenced off their clean water and left the other ones open still. You know, and we had to go back and say, well, you did a good job there, but you know, you need to take that fence and put it over here, right? We don't mind them getting into the good water. We just don't want them getting into the bad water.
Not only that, they also put up signs up there saying, you know, keep out, do not drink, and stuff like that. I don't know when they taught the animals how to read.
This is a map from, all this information that I'm showing you is the government's information. We didn't create any of this stuff. We just took their information and we're using it. This is a map from 2005. This is when we started talking about cumulative impacts and trying to get somebody to pay attention to what's going on up there. All those little red dots are those sites. They're a lease site, a well site. There's a facility there in that area. Now that last slide I showed you, that showed the 75% of the sites being contaminated. If you take that study that we did and you extrapolate that to something like this, 75% of these little red dots are contaminated up there. Now that would be unacceptable anywhere in North America. But up there, because it's out of sight, out of mind, it happens all the time. I remember just recently that a spill that happened in Vancouver from one of the tankers released a bunch of fluid. Within a week, they had it cleaned up. Up there, it's a different story. Gulf of Mexico. Everybody knows that big tragedy that happened. British Petroleum's lost control of a well and almost destroyed the Gulf of Mexico down there. And that's a tragedy that should never happen. Northeastern BC. There is a site up there called the PJ oil field. It's one of the older oil sites, pipeline well sites that we have up there. Pipelines are up to 50 years old out there. This is actually an old map. There's actually 2 more new leaks up here on this thing. The little square box at the top, I know you can't see it, but it's August 2000. That pipe has been leaking since August 2000. Image on the right is the actual site. We've been trying to get them to clean it up. And the OGC, the Oil and Gas Commission, went to the company and said, well, we've got a real easy solution to this. We'll just expand your lease site and fence it off. Right? Not clean it up, fence it off. So they did that, and as they were going out there to dig the holes to put the fence, they realized that the contaminants has leached out under the ground, and the site is actually twice as big as what they thought it was. So now they're forced to clean it up. But this is what goes on a steady basis up there. August 2000, Pine River oil spill. Pembina Pipelines purchased Federated Pipelines. This was actually my first duty as chief at West Moberly. The August 2000, I was driving back from Prince George, and I was, I think, probably the first civilian on site in the Pine Pass to discover this. I was there when the hole was going over the bank to try and find where the rupture was on the pipeline. It dumped 951 cubic meters of light crude oil into the Pine River. 200 kilometers of shore was impacted. George, I believe you were out there on the site.
Yeah, we were out there about a month, I guess. I was working as an environmental monitor at the time, and the whole valley smelled. Very powerful, overwhelming. The river was just, it looked like a river of oil, just for lack of a way of explaining it. There was dead fish everywhere. There was animals, ducks covered in oil. Beavers were found in their dens in a riverbank, in their houses, trying to get away. They were dead. And this happened 80 kilometers west of Chetwynd. And they didn't get that river contained until it reached Chetwynd. And they were on it right away. And that's how bad it was. But we never really, the rest of British Columbia, I don't think, heard anything about it. They kept it quiet. So, you know, it's just one of those things that we have to deal with on a constant basis over there, no matter what happens. If you're west of the Rockies, you don't hear what goes on over there.
This is a protected herd of bison in the Fontas area, the Fontas herd. They are identified as a species at risk under SARA. One of the things that we talked to the ONGC about is that they need to fence their sites. I mentioned that before. One of the reasons is that it keeps the animals out. Now, a bison is it's a big animal. It decides to go somewhere, it's going to go somewhere. But what happened here was the image on the right is a cow, and she got her head stuck under the pipes, and they couldn't get her out, and they had to put her down up there. And they weren't going to tell anybody that this was going on, except for somebody drove by and seen what was happening and filmed it and took pictures of it out there. This is a protected species, an endangered species. That oil field that I was showing you earlier that had the contaminated site, well, that's the summer habitat zone of the PJ caribou herd, which is also a species at risk animal up there. And we have images, I don't have them on here. I should warn everybody, I've got a couple pictures in here that are not very pretty. This is one of them, so too late, haha. Caught you by surprise. I got a couple more in here that are a little rough. Maybe not. Pine River, this is some guy was driving through the Pine River and took a picture of this. And I know it's really hard to see here, but what you're looking at is a D8 bulldozer, a big piece of machinery, and two belly scrapers. They were doing an upgrade to the Pine Pass Highway, and they were in need of gravel. And instead of going and getting a permit for the gravel pit, they went into the Pine River and dug gravel out of the Pine River. This is a fish-bearing river. Nothing ever came of it up there. Out of sight, out of mind. They do stuff and they get away with it, and when they get caught, nothing really happens. We call this the fox watching the hen house. W.A.C. Bennett, they call it a recreational lake. As you heard earlier, it's not a lake. Elder George Desley had taught that it's a reservoir. It's a man-made cesspool, is what it is. This is the debris that floats into the river, into the dam every year. The image on the right is my son and a friend of his. They wanted to go swimming, so we went up there, and it was a nice sunny day. They crawled out over the logs and jumped into the water, and it's all sandy, silty beach. It's actually, if you were in Hawaii, it would be really nice, you know, but you're not. You're up in northeastern BC. They were out there swimming away, and the wind came up, and the waves started coming in, and I had my kid and a friend of his, friends of mine's kid, stuck out in the middle of this debris of logs, and these logs started slamming back and forth amongst each other, and I was like, it turned into a pretty serious situation. We're trying to get them out of there so they wouldn't get killed. But this is a constant that happens up there. This debris, whenever they raise and lower the water in the Wilson Reservoir, it rinses. It's called the bathtub effect. When you jump in the bathtub, the water goes up. When you get out, the water goes down. Well, when they raise and lower the water in the reservoir, it does the same thing. It's called a rinsing effect. And because it's, what did you call it? Loam?
Silty clay loam.
Silty clay loam. I have a hard time with that one. It washes the banks out. They lose 1 to 3 meters of shoreline around the circumference of that reservoir every year due to this. And that debris falls into the river, into the reservoir. And they pile it up. When it blows in, they get out there with their boats and they pile it up and they burn it and they get rid of it as much as they can. But it's a continuous thing. BC Hydro announces that the mercury levels in the reservoir are diminishing. Well, our study, I don't know if everybody saw our little event that we did yesterday, but our study, we performed a study on the fish, and it's showing that it's not diminishing, it's actually increasing. Beachfront property. This is the silty sandy loam, clay loam. This is the rinsing effect that happens up there. This family had, I believe it was 60 feet of shoreline. When they constructed that house, and over the number of years that they lived there, that house finally fell into the bank up there. Image on the right is the dust storms that happen. They've moved one of the northern communities that are at the top end of the Wilson Reservoir. They moved that community 3 times because of the dust that happens there. When they draw the water down in the reservoir, it's just a big sandy beach of the silty clay loam. And if you step in it, it's like walking on talcum powder. It just billows up. And wind comes up and it blows it over the mountains and all over the place. It causes quite a bit of problems. Attachie Slide, 1973. The whole side of the bank of the Peace River slid and blocked off the Peace River for quite a few hours up there. This is one of the issues that we're going to have with Site C. Is that whole countryside moves. George had mentioned that when you go up there, if you come up there, you'll see that the banks along the river are stepped. There are billions of tons of land that's moving up there all the time. They've identified this in their impact, and they made an assumption that this is not going to be an issue for them. Clean, not green. One of the biggest things that the BC Hydro and BC have been stating is that Site C is a clean, green energy project. There is nothing clean about this project. Flooding 6,500 hectares of prime Class 1 and Class 2 farmland is not a clean project. Destroying valuable ungulate calving and wintering grounds is not clean. The fish you see on the left are fish that we can't eat. That's my son on the right. That's his first fish he caught. Back when he was 9 years old, I took him fishing. He snagged himself a 9-pound Dolly Varden out of the Dinosaur Reservoir. And because I know what I know about the mercury content, we couldn't eat it. He had snagged it so bad we couldn't release it and let it go. So we had to bring it home. It wound up going in the garbage on that. But this is a moment that a father should be proud with his son. And I had to explain to him, well, you know, there's an issue with the health and the safety of the fish, and if we eat it, we could get sick. on it, and I don't want to do that. And he got upset, and you know, but this is what happens. There's never been a study performed on the First Nations in the area until it still hasn't been, until the study that we have done just recently. Health Canada it wasn't Health Canada, it was, I thought it was Health Canada, but somebody was releasing a news bulletin into the local newspapers up there, warning people not to eat more than 1 serving of fish a month due to the mercury content in the Wilson system. Now, my nation is the closest nation, our nation is the closest nation to the W.A.C. Bennett Dam, the Peace Canyon Dam, and the reservoirs. We have never been notified. No one's ever sent us a notification. This is the warning that's in the yearly synopsis, the fishing regulations that come out, and it warns about the mercury content in the Wilson Reservoir.
Mm-hmm. And that was it.
This is so what prompted yesterday was my family, the Miller family. We have a fish camp that happens at Summit Lake, north of Summit Lake on the Crooked River. Now, Summit Lake is the start of the water that flows into the Arctic watershed from towards the Prince George region. And my family's been fishing there for about 50 years, having this camp. And a couple of years ago, we were all sitting around the fire and we were talking. Site C was on everybody's mind about what do we do about this? How can we stop this? And, you know, if they do that, we're going to lose fishing places and all the mercury. And somebody said, well, where do these fish come from? And the Crooked River flows into the Parsnip, which is now part of the Site C, W.C. Bennett Wilson Reservoir system. We got thinking, well, the fish that are in the reservoir are full of mercury. These fish are attached to that. We should probably take a look and see what's going on. So we ran a study. This is one of my cousins, and this is our salmon. We don't have salmon up there. The bow trout, the lake trout, the Dolly Varden, they have lots of fat content. We smoke them, we dry them, we can them. We throw that big fish on the fire when we're at camp, and we barbecue it, cook it up with some onions, and you know, and it tastes pretty good. So we thought. This is the study zone. You can't see it very well. I don't know if this little. Can you see my dot? That was where my family has its camp, and this is this was a study that was done in conjunction with the McCloud Lake Indian Band, which is their members of Treaty 8 too, and they went down to the second site and they participated in the study. We caught 65 fish out of this site. Our site is about 60 kilometers upstream from the Wilson Reservoir. This is the graph that shows the mercury levels on the fish. This line here that comes up here, that's the line for human consumption, personal consumption. If the blue line is over that, you need to concern yourself about that. Women of childbearing age should not eat. Here's the Hershey Kiss, guys. Oh, no, sorry. See? It's not full of mercury. Our study showed that women of childbearing age, toddlers, and elders should not eat more than that a day of fish. Right? So we'd eat 3 or 4 of those during that weekend. We'd have our mercury fulfillment for about 4 years in 2 days. This amount of fish, it would take about a year to eat that up there. Now, we were shocked. We weren't expecting that. We were being told that the mercury levels were decreasing and things are starting to settle out. What our study showed, oh, come on, is that it's the opposite. There's only 5 fish that fall below that line of personal human consumption that were safe to eat up there. This other line, where is it? I believe it's this one right here. Now, for some reason, BC has a commercial consumption line, and the commercial consumption line is higher than the personal consumption line. I don't know why. It's better. Yeah, like if you eat the thing, you eat the thing, whether you eat it commercially or you eat it personally, but it's higher. And you can see that there's quite a few fish that fall above that on that. Now, Site C is below on the same river, but it's below WAC Bennett and Peace Canyon. It's going to be a continuation of this, and there's no reason to think that this is not going to just transfer into there. The issue of mercury is a very alive issue with us right now because of this study. But the other aspect of this whole thing that people aren't paying attention to is that they've already taken up 70% of the Peace River for Peace Canyon in WAC Bennett. WAC Bennett powers 1 of every 3 lights in the province of British Columbia. It's flooded the Wilson, it's flooded the Finley River, the Parsnip River, and all the tributaries that touch it are all impacted by this. So the only thing that we have left is that 30%. And Site C is going to take up 50% of what's left there. And that's the prime area that we have for the ungulates, for fishing. The dam is downstream from the Moberly River and the Halfway River. So both of the rivers, the one that comes out of our lake is going to be inundated now in the flood zone, and the Halfway River that flows right beside the Halfway River First Nations is going to be inundated as well. Last year, this is my son again. I got lots of pictures of my son because he's easy to take pictures of. I bought him a fly rod. We went up the Sekunka River. This is one of the other rivers. This is something the province says. Well, go somewhere else. You know, there's lots of places. Go somewhere else and fish. When we went up the Sekunka River, I took him fly fishing. He caught his first little fish on the right, you know, and he was pretty excited about it. And then we caught a pike, which was kind of surprising because pike are usually a lake fish, and we caught it out of the river. But, you know, I showed him how to get it and get it ready. We're going to go home and we're going to cook it on the fire, and, you know, he's going to feed the family. He caught the fish, and he's going to provide for the family. We hopped in the truck and drove across the bridge to turn around to head out, and we found this sign on the other side of the road. It was nailed to the back side of the tree. And you can see the road in behind the sign there. And the sign says, "Notice, the concentration of selenium in the waters of the Blind Creek is above the Canadian Drinking Water Guidelines." What does that mean? Like, holy, does that mean can we eat the fish or what? Now, there's a coal mine up Blind Creek. And there's a coal mine on all these rivers, all these other rivers that we have there. And all these other rivers have selenium issues like this on them. So when the province says go somewhere else, where do we go? Where can we go? No forced interference. I read you that little caption on the bottom of that oral promise. This is Moberly Lake. This is the lake that we have lived on for over 400 years, or around for over 400 years. This is a sign warning of the extirpation of lake trout. In the early, I think it was in the early 50s, late 40s, BC ran a commercial fishery off of Moberly Lake and another lake there called Gwillem Lake for the war effort. They were catching the fish and they were feeding the troops out of that. And they over-harvested out of the lake. About 5 years ago, they came to us kind of with their hat in hand and their head bowed down and said, "We have to inform you that you need to stop fishing the lake trout or they're going to become extinct. They're going to become extirpated out of Moberly Lake. We have to actually intervene and develop a recovery plan." So we had to voluntarily shut down the fishing on Moberly Lake. This is a lake that we live on. The lake trout are our salmon. You know, they're high fat content. They're like the bull trout and the elders really like these. So we sit down and we start looking at, well, what is there? George had mentioned that the caribou are threatened, the grizzly bear and the buffalo, mountain sheep, goats, they're all threatened right now. The lake trout in Moberly Lake are being extirpated. Oil and gas has polluted the water and contaminated the moose. We know that now. There's a concern about the medicinal and edible plants, of the spraying of herbicides, and the oil and gas. The oil and gas process of cleaning up a site is called solution by dilution. That picture I showed of the moose with its head in the water drinking the pond, well, the company would go in there with a big pump, stick a hose in there, and then spray that water into the bush, onto the plants, and get rid of it. That's called solution by dilution, and then they would just bury the site. They'd bring in loads of dirt, and they'd bury it. They wouldn't actually clean it up. There's no studies ever being done on what happens to the plants when those things are being sprayed on them. I want to eat caribou before I die. We did a study, and this is the book. It's a report that we put together about what the effects of caribou, how we utilize caribou, and what we did with caribou. It was put together in 2009 by the community, and we put it together to identify what we're losing by not being able to harvest the caribou anymore. It's the loss of food, clothing, art. Elements in the caribou were used for medicinal purposes. The habitat, you didn't just go and hunt caribou. As you went up there, you gathered medicines, you gathered food while you were there. The transmission of knowledge. This is George's grandmother, Molly Desjardins. She was fleshing out a hide. She's passed on now. She's passed a number of years ago. But all the information that she had went with her. That she didn't, if it wasn't transferred to her son and then transferred to George, we would have lost all that up there. The secondary impacts to this is because we're not harvesting the caribou anymore, we're having to harvest more on the other animals. We focus more on the moose and focus more on the elk. And we hunted these animals and called it traditional seasonal round. We hunted the caribou at a different time than we hunted the moose and we hunted the elk. George was explaining to me earlier that we would hunt the moose, the caribou in the springtime because they had high fat content. Throughout the winter, the moose and the elk and the deer would burn up their fat storages and they would be skinny. And you wouldn't take them at that time because there wouldn't be any fat. So you'd let them build up. But because the caribou were living on top of the mountaintops, they were eating the rock lichen, they were maintaining their fat levels. And we would hunt them in the spring and allow the other animals to get fat again. This is the habitat zone of the caribou in northeastern, in behind, they're called the Northern Mountain Ecotype caribou. I don't know why they call them that. We call them caribou. The image on the far left is what the habitat zone looked like before they flooded the Wilson Reservoir. The image in the middle is the Wilson Reservoir, and the colorful image on the right is what happened to the caribou after they flooded. They broke up into these small little groups of caribou, these smaller herds, and they fragmented when they flooded the Wilson Reservoir, they fragmented the caribou migration pattern. So that it became a northern caribou and a southern caribou, and the southern caribou herds got fragmented even more. Now, we had to go to court to protect these caribou. It was called the Moberly case. We challenged the province of British Columbia because they were issuing a mining permit in the critical habitat of the burnt pine caribou herd, and they violated their own laws. BC had laws in place, best management practices. Do not reduce terrestrial lichen ground cover. Do not destroy arboreal lichen. Arboreal lichen is the witch's hair, the hair that hangs off the trees, and the terrestrial lichen is the rock lichen that's on the ground. Do not create disturbances that will displace the caribou, and do not improve predator or human access to these zones. And they were trying to build a mine right in the middle of one of these things. So they're violating what their own best practices were saying. Canada's got a Species at Risk Act, and they've got their own set of guidelines that BC wasn't listening to. I'm trying to hurry up here. So we have been involved in management, I guess, for generations, thousands of years. Up until BC Hydro, there was fish in the rivers and in the lakes and the streams. When BC Hydro came in the last 50 years, they've polluted the waters so much that we've lost the fishing industry up there. So this is the stuff that we have to face with. This is a comment from Sarah Palin. Everybody knows who Sarah Palin is. She's from way up north. And it just, when I read this, it boggled my mind. I was like, how can anybody say something like that? You know, if caribou need to be sacrificed for the sake of energy independence, I say, Mr. Caribou, take one for the team. What the? Holy. Those are the Hackney caribou. That little strip that you see right here, that's the wintering zone. That's where they spend the whole winter, along that ridge, right? They stay up there because it's windswept. The rocks are exposed. They don't have to fight the snow. The animals, the wolves don't come up there. It's too cold. It's horrible. I don't know why they're up there. It doesn't make any sense, but you know, that's where they go and they live. And the snow's deep. The wolves can't get up there. But if you build a mine up there, you've got a road right to it. The wolves just hop on the road and up the hill they go, and look, there's all these caribou, right? Pretty soon there's not all these caribou. I talked about the fact that we're fighting with a mining company. Well, this is the mining company. We never opposed mining. We opposed where this mine was. We asked the mining company, let's find another spot. They brought in this ADCAR system, which was a system where they were going to dig a trench and then sidewall mine in, and then they would dig another trench and move everything over and fill that trench up, and it was called active reclamation, which looked really good. We didn't know much about it, but it looked much better than clearing the top of the mountain off with an open pit. We said, this is a good technology. It looks like a good technology. Let's just do it somewhere else. They ignored us. They went up there. The provincial biologist wrote a submission to the province saying, if you do this, you're going to destroy the caribou. We've been working on trying to recover these caribou. You're going to directly destroy the core wintering range of threatened caribou. The provincial government ignored their own lead scientist and issued a bulk sample permit. And they went up there and they built this bulk sample pit up there. This is an accident. Before they built the bulk sample pit, this is while we wound up in this big fight, is we found out that there was activity going on in the critical wintering habitat zone of the burnt pine caribou herd. We sent somebody up there and they came back with these pictures saying, what is this? What's going on here? This company went up there without a permit, without a license, and cleared over 85 hectares of land right in the middle of the burnt pine caribou herd habitat. BC's best practices say do not disturb terrestrial ground. What happened? Where did it fail? You know, we're supposed to be protecting the caribou, not doing this. We filed a judicial review. BC, we all went to court over it, and 2010, the lower court held that the treaty right to hunt included the specific protection of caribou because it's an animal that we used to harvest and we couldn't anymore. Given that the species is of central significance to our traditional way of life today and into the future, we have to manage to recover these animals. We don't just want to look at them. We want to eat them. You know, we want to utilize them. We want to carry on our traditional way of life. We butt heads once in a while with certain environmentalists that think that we should just look at stuff, but these are animals that we utilize. You know, you could say they're our cattle. You know, we respect them. We do our prayers. We do our offerings. We give thanks to them. The court ruled that the treaty protects the right to exercise meaningfully traditional hunting practices, which mean more than merely hunting for food. BC contended, we have the treaty right to harvest caribou in accordance with our traditional seasonal round. That means we hunt the caribou at this time, and we hunt the moose at that time, and we hunt the elk at this time. That's our traditional seasonal round. Current population status of the caribou, northeastern BC, this is the southern population of the caribou. There's less than 400 of them now. We failed in protecting the burnt pine caribou herd. We protected their habitat, but the bulk sample pit that they built wiped them out. There's no more caribou there on that. We're in the process right now of trying to protect the Moberly herd, which at one point was at 191 in 1995, and they're down to 23 now. We're running a caribou penning program right now. You might have heard about it in the paper and stuff. We've got 11 caribou right now in a pen, pregnant cows. We hold them there until they calve, and we allow the calves to get big enough so that they can run and fend for themselves, and then we release them back out into their habitat, and hopefully they survive. Last year we had we released 9 calves and 10 cows, and we increased the herd by 32% at that time. Within 2 weeks of releasing them, 4 caribou got eaten by wolves up there. But that's what wolves do, right? This is the other picture. I talked about the caribou herd, the burnt pine caribou herd. This is a young bull that fell off the bank. The scientist, the environmental scientist that was working for the mining company stood up in a public meeting and said that these caribou need to have this mine in order to save them. This young bull fell off the side of the bank and died in the pit. The cow left that site and walked all the way to the other side of the mountains and joined the Scott herd, and then stayed over there for a winter, and then walked all the way back to the top of the mountain. Actually was wound up back where they were before, all by herself. So Site C, going back to Site C now, is this Site C is going to continue this up there. This power is not needed for homes. BC has told people that they need to power 400,000 homes in the province of British Columbia. That's a lie. That's not what this power is for. This power is for development. They're going to need power for the LNG market. They're going to need power for all the mines that they have up there. So there's a solution, a workable solution, an alternative to flooding that valley and creating that energy. We know now, because CanGEA, Canadian Geothermal Organization, released a report saying that geothermal energy is completely 100% viable in the province of British Columbia and doable within the cost margins of what BC Hydro has stated. We are shipping gas out of the Treaty 8 territory to the coast. This is what they're planning to do, and turn it into LNG and ship it overseas to other countries so that they can burn it for energy. Canada is supposed to be a world-leading country in technology. There's got to be a way we can figure out how to use the gas here in a cleaner means and use it as a bridge until we can figure out a better solution to flooding that darn valley. That valley should be protected, not destroyed. With what's going on in California right now, you can't do it. So our little little thing that we did yesterday was to try and wake people up to what's going on. Site C started as a $7 billion idea, a bad idea. It's now a $9 billion mistake. By the time they're done, it's going to be a $12 billion nightmare. And we're not going to be able to pay for it. It's going to be something that our generation is not going to have to deal with. It's going to be our grandkids that are going to have to deal with it. And you know, it's not, it doesn't have to happen. That's the part that, I'm sorry, pisses me off about this. They've made up their mind to do this, and they're just doing it, and they're not listening to anything else. And that's what's wrong. And if we have to go to court and fight this thing, that's what we're doing, you know. This is the end. I know you guys, there's other people that are waiting to speak and stuff, and I'm sorry we took so long. Well, I took so long. I get going on this. These are the twin sisters in the background. These are the spiritual mountains of the Dundee people. In times of trouble, they are supposed to provide for us, and we're supposed to go to these mountains, and they would take care of us. Right now, I doubt that could happen with what's going on up in northeastern BC. As you know, water is the lifeblood of every living thing. We need to respect it and protect it. So part of what we're doing here today is hazard force support. If you can, go to nosite-c.com, and every penny helps, guys, on this. Whatever you can do, please do. Tell your friends. If you can't, donate. Tell somebody else. Support what you can. We have to have a better way of doing this. We can't keep doing it like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Roland and Elder George. Thank you. There is no doubt that West Moberly and other Treaty 8 First Nations are at the ground zero of the absolute devastation that Site C would wreak in the valley. But make no mistake, if Site C happens, we will all pay. We will pay through our hydro bills. We will pay through the loss of credit ratings. $9 billion is a whole heck of a lot of money to buy 165 jobs. The Geothermal Association, as of right now, says they would employ 2,000 people to produce the same amount of energy. And Treaty 8 right now, and the landowners, the Peace Valley landowners, have 7 court cases happening on behalf of themselves and actually of all of us. And this is where Raven Trust comes in. Please join me in welcoming Sue Smitten, the Executive Director of Raven Trust.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's a true honor to be here with Chief Roland and Elder George. The legal stand that they're taking, it benefits all of us. But they're doing it whether we're there or not, because you've heard what's at stake, you've seen what's at stake. Raven has been doing this for a while. We're a legal defense fund with a charitable status. Our mandate is to assist First Nations in protecting their traditional rights against unsanctioned or state-sanctioned industrial expansions. But when you go to court against two levels of government in this case, because there was a provincial hearing just a couple of weeks ago, and there is a federal hearing. It's really expensive. The tactics tend to be outspend and delay. And so this round is going to cost about $250,000. That's a lot of money, any way you slice it. The government has deep pockets, but we have the energy of this room and the circle that we all created when we held hands, when we joined, and we have the conviction of our beliefs that that's not right, and that we all can do something. So right now, like, I'm hoping that you're all, having heard all this, thinking in your head, what can I do? Well, hopefully you also all have this little card that was handed out, because this is part of the new campaign, nosite-c.com. The funds will be gathered. You can do it three ways, actually, but the funds will be held in trust for the Three Nations, West Moberly, McLeod Lake Indian Band, and Prophet River, and they will go to cover these legal fees. So we're asking you to join the circle, and you can do that by going to nosite-c.com and donating. You can also go and create your own online fundraising page, sort of like Movember or Run for the Cure, where you get your own page and you can put your own message on there and put your own picture on there if you want, and send it out to your friends and ask them to help you. Because one person might donate $50 or might donate $500, but if you get 20 of your friends to help, suddenly that's a bigger event. And the other thing we're asking you to do is join the circle through social media. So if there is a Facebook page, join the circle, go and like it, and then tell all your friends you liked it and share it, because a lot of the information about the campaign and the fundraising and the legal action will all be put up there on that Facebook page so that you can keep track. The next hearing is just a very short time away, July 20th. So I'd like you to all put that in your calendars. And I hope that when you leave here, you feel motivated to do something, because listening to Chief Rowland's words and to George speak about what's at stake made me feel like even just this little bit that we're doing here can be part of a growing circle that expands across the province, that we help to encircle the Peace River Valley and protect it. So please join with us and do that. Thank you.
It takes many groups and many people to build a strong circle. Some of the groups that are working with Sierra Club BC are here today. We have George Smith, former director of Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, and Sarah Cox from Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiatives. I would also like to mention Wilderness Committee, who is hosting tomorrow's event. So if you have friends in Vancouver, please let them know. George Smith.
Well, this is neat, looking out at all. I've been facing this way, and I'm looking out at a whole bunch of Victoria people who've come out to hear the words of the Treaty 8 people tonight. And this is, for me, this is wonderful. I don't know, do any of you, I'm sure some of you, I know Vicki Husband does, but do any of you remember the Tatsunshini battle to protect Attachie Landslide? Just stick your hands up if anybody remembers that. Oh, good. Back in about 1993, I went out on the road for often with other people to try to raise awareness, like the Chief and Elder George are doing now. And it was a combination of trying to raise awareness and trying to raise some dollars. And we won that. We, the people of British Columbia, stopped one of the silliest mine proposals ever, and we have this wonderful park there. I was involved in other issues as well, where I go out on the land and talk to people. I was for the Tatsunshini issue, I was in the Robson Square Media Center in Vancouver when my old friend Paul George from the Wilderness Committee stood up at the end of the meeting and kind of hung a job on all of us in the audience. And he basically said, well, think what it costs to go out with your family, to go to a movie or to go to dinner. Back in 1993, it was about $20 or $30, $40 maybe, depending on the size of your family. Well, think today what you could do if you just one time made a donation of the equivalent of what it would cost to go out and have dinner with yourself and a friend, and the effect that could have, $25, $50, whatever it might happen to be. So what Paul did that night, it was a pretty tense night because we were trying to, it was a wonderful night, but what Paul did was he took a hat and he did the old proverbial pass the hat thing, which I'm going to see how we do tonight with that. I'm going to ask Elder George to, he's offered, he loves his hat. Have you seen this wonderful black, he's both a cowboy and an Indian at the same time, right? So George has offered to pass his hat around just to see if you don't mind, I'm asking you to consider maybe forgoing one dinner with your family, one movie out with your family, and throw some money into George's hat. And if you have the money, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. It's just something that I saw work tremendously well back in 1993. And we did find enough money, and we did protect the Tatsunshini, and we protected a whole lot of other things in those days. I don't know where Vicky went, but Vicky knows what's going on. And I'm sure a lot of you know her since this is her town. Anyway, I just thought if you don't mind, think about doing that. And if you don't have the money now, what Susan said earlier about connecting through Raven and the long-term objective of supporting this issue would be tremendously helpful. Thanks.
Please join me in welcoming Sarah Cox, my old boss at the Sierra Club, and now the Senior Conservation Program Manager for Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative.
Thanks, Anna. It's really inspiring to see so many people here tonight. I'll just speak for a minute or two. The Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative seeks to protect one of the last intact mountain ecosystems left on our planet. It stretches from Yellowstone all the way up to the Arctic Circle, passes through 5 U.S. states, Alberta and BC. Almost 1/3 of the entire region is in BC, and 2 territories. It's the source of drinking water for about 15 million North Americans, and remarkably, the Yellowstone to Yukon corridor still has the entire suite of wildlife that still existed in this region at the time of the last ice age. And in the entire Yellowstone to Yukon region, which covers over 3,000 kilometers, the peace is the most imperiled part of this entire ecosystem. And that's because of the furious pace of development there that you've heard about tonight. Global Forest Watch has done a report which shows that the pace of development in the peace exceeds the pace of development in Alberta's tar sands. There's fracking and forestry and pipelines and coal mines, with many more coal mines planned, despite the fact that you heard from Chief Rowland tonight about the selenium contamination already. And then there is Site C. Site C, as you heard, would flood 83 kilometers of the Peace River. When you add the amount that would be flooded from the 2 tributaries, the Halfway and the Moberly River, it's more than 100 kilometers that would be flooded. From Victoria to Duncan, just to put that into perspective, is about 60 kilometers. So we're looking at an area almost all the way to Nanaimo from Victoria that would be flooded. This is not a small area that we're talking about. Would flood some of BC's best agricultural land, and agrologists have issued reports showing that the piece has the potential to provide fruit and vegetables for 1 million people. Let's think about that in light of what's going on in California these days. Also, from the Yellowstone to Yukon point of view, the piece connects the southern Rocky Mountains wildlife populations with northern wildlife populations, and it threatens to sever this entire ecosystem, Site C and the other development in the Peace region. We are all going to pay for this. It's at almost $9 billion now. We printed this postcard 6 months ago. When we printed this postcard, the cost was $7.9 billion. It's now at $8.8 billion, and it's going to climb. So we're standing with Treaty 8 to say no to the Site C dam. We're supporting the 7 court cases that are going on right now, launched by Peace Valley landowners and First Nations. These court cases provide one of our best chances of stopping the dam. BC Hydro, the BC government, and the federal government, who the court cases are against, don't have to raise money for these court cases because we are all paying for them. First Nations do have to raise money, and so I ask you to give, and to give generously. This is a really important issue, and it's so great to see that people in the South and on the coast care about what's going on in another part of our province. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and please stand with the First Nations and help support the court cases.
Site C, beside being an example of utter environmental devastation, is also a social justice issue. It's a social justice issue, obviously, for First Nations, but also for everybody in the North who is currently seeing the price of their fruits and vegetables go up, and they will go up in the South as well as the California drought intensifies. A government with vision would recognize the potential of Site C to provide, as Sarah said, fruits and vegetables, the building blocks of nutrition for 1 million people. It would lift the shadow of the dam so that the farmers and landowners, some of whom have been hanging on for generations and putting their own substance into maintaining their farms because they can't afford to invest, knowing that the dam might go in any time. A government with vision would lift the shadow of the dam and invest in a thriving agricultural sector that would provide food security for BC families. If things continue with plans for Site C, fruits and vegetables will soon become an item of luxury for BC families rather than a daily staple, first in the North and then in the South. So on the social justice side of things, tonight we have Kairos, who is co-hosting this event. Janet Gray will just speak briefly about what they're doing to raise awareness. And then all the way from Ottawa, our last speaker tonight is Craig Benjamin from Amnesty International Canada, who have just been to the Peace to do a study on the social impacts of resource development in the North.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to see such a wonderful crowd here. Kairos is a faith-based social justice initiative of 11 churches and organizations across Canada. And then we have regions, and so I'm the regional rep for BC Yukon. And we have a Victoria group as well that is hosting this evening. The churches, government, and the people of Canada have a horrible history of, as you know, of Indigenous residential schools. We are so sorry for that history, and churches and organizations are trying to do things, of course, to try and figure out what reconciliation looks like. The final Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearing will take place at the beginning of June in Ottawa, and that's just the end of the truth-telling and the beginning of looking at what reconciliation looks like. What does reconciliation look like as this TRC comes to its conclusion in Ottawa? We are at a watershed moment. How will we choose to live in a reconciled relationship with each other and the land? What does reconciliation look like in an economy dominated by resource extraction on traditional Indigenous territories? How are the struggles for Indigenous rights and ecological integrity linked here in Canada and around the world? Well, there are many links. And I really am grateful for Chief Roland and Elder for speaking here and for all of you for being here on this land. I want to just share one initiative. BC Yukon region of Kairos is running an 8-day mobile justice bus that will go from Vancouver up to the Peace River at the end of August. We are looking for creative, community-minded people who want to stop in communities along the road on the way up to the Peace River to stand on the front lines looking at issues that define our time: Indigenous rights, resource extraction, food security, and climate change. If you're interested in finding out more about this, please sign the paper on the Kairos table at the back. Thank you.
Amnesty International needs no introduction. Craig Benjamin is their campaigner for human rights of Indigenous peoples, and he's just coming from the Peace Valley with some startling results.
Hi. Don't worry about straining your necks. I'll tell you what the pictures show. Thank you for the chance to be here. I want to acknowledge the Songhees and Esquimalt people for the chance to be here in their traditional territory, and also acknowledge the people of Treaty 8, whose lands I just came from, and to thank Elder George Desolé for his words as he opened tonight. So the image up on the screen says, the Site C Dam, a threat to fundamental human rights. And maybe I don't need to say more than that. Maybe you've heard enough already to know that that's the case. You've heard about the threat that it poses to the culture and way of life of the people of that land, the threat that it poses to their ability to maintain their relationship to the animals that fed their ancestors, the threat that it poses to their ability to go out on that land and to gather the plants and medicines that heal their people. You've heard about the threat that it poses of their ability to maintain their own institutions, their own ways of making decisions about the management of that land. Right? These are all fundamental human rights. The right to a healthy environment, the right to clean water, the right to one's culture, the rights to one's identity, the right of Indigenous peoples to make their own decisions about their lives and their futures. These are all fundamental human rights, and they are all being threatened by the plans to proceed with this dam. In fact, the very way this is being pushed forward is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of standards that exist in the international community, which Canada has sworn to uphold. It's a violation of our own laws. Just as Chief Roland Wilson said at the beginning, Canada is breaking its own laws. And when it pursues a double standard, when it says it doesn't need to meet the standard of laws when it comes to the lives of First Nations peoples, then it's practicing discrimination in its rawest form. And it should be opposed for that reason, too. Now, I don't have a clicker here to advance the screen, so, and the text should come in a second, so I can tell people, just continue. Great. So last time I was in Victoria, it was for an event done with many of the same partners, with the Sierra Club and with Kairos and with Raven, and we were celebrating the victory of the Sokotian people at the Supreme Court of Canada, where their right to their ownership of their land had finally been recognized. But one of the other things that that court decision did is it set out in the clearest possible language that if a government wants to trample on the rights of Indigenous peoples, there's an extremely high standard that it has to meet of justification to show why it should be allowed to go forward. And those standards include they have to meet the duty to consult and accommodate, a duty which has been really importantly clarified by that case at West Moberly that Chief Wilson was talking about, that the duty to consult and accommodate must be meaningful, it must be met. There has to be a compelling and substantial objective, and that objective has to reflect both Canada and the Canadian society as a whole, but also Aboriginal people's own needs and their values. It can't be one-sided. Any harm must be strictly necessary, and the harm must not outweigh the benefits. And it can't substantially deprive future generations of the benefit of the land. These are the tests which our own Supreme Court has set out. And this plan fails every one of those tests. Every one of them. And yet 2 levels of government want to proceed with it. 2 levels of government want to fight it in the courts. 2 levels of government want to expend all of their resources to try and pursue it, even though the highest court in the land has already set out a test that they're unable to meet. Anna mentioned the fact that Amnesty is doing a research project up in the Peace region, and I want to tell you just a little bit about it because it goes to one of those tests. So if we could advance the slide again, please. This goes to the issue of the harm not outweighing the benefits. Because what are the claimed benefits for this project? I spent 2 weeks in Fort St. John, an area, visiting some of the First Nations, talking with people in local government. A lot of people are talking about jobs coming from the Site C Dam, jobs in construction, benefits to the community. But what are those benefits? I really would encourage people to take a look at the environmental impact assessment and what it really said, because it's a really significant findings that exposes the other side of this claim of benefits. It exposes the fact that in a community where there have already been so much resource development, exactly as we saw in Chief Wilson's presentation, all of the oil and gas development that's already taken place has created a situation where the ratio of short-term, temporary, transient workers to long-term residents in Fort St. John is 3 to 1. It's created a situation that has driven the cost of housing sky high. It has created a situation where the medical services are strained beyond the breaking point. It's created a situation where frontline service providers say they're running on empty. They are overtaxed, overstrained, trying to meet the needs of the population. So the jobs that this would create, clearly the environmental impact assessment said, will be filled in one way only: to bring more outside workers into that community, more outside workers to lay additional strains on a social safety net that is already strained beyond what it can bear. And the reason that we as Amnesty International were particularly concerned and wanted to look at this was because of work we're already doing in Canada around the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We already know that in Canada, Indigenous women and girls are up to 7 times more likely to experience violence of the most brutal and extreme forms. And when we look at things like housing shortages, we look at things like a collapsing medical system, we look at overstrained service providers, we look at a wage economy that has the sharpest division between men's wages and women's wages anywhere in the country, then we look at what many people in that community described as a perfect storm for conditions to accentuate, exaggerate, perpetuate acts of violence against women. And where in this are the lives and safety of the Indigenous women? Add this to the kinds of strains, the kinds of impacts on the First Nations communities themselves that we already heard about. And where are the benefits to this project? And do those benefits outweigh the harm? If we could advance the slide a couple of clicks. And again, please. And again, sorry. Oh, looks like it's going to have to take another click. I just want to pull up something. So I said that this is a violation of the protections that exist in international law. I want to name 2 things. We talk about forced evictions. A forced eviction is when people are removed from their homes, but also removed from their use of the land without due process of the law. And international standards, what constitutes due process of the law, includes the idea that states have to give priority to exploring strategies that would minimize this displacement. that they would fully explore all possible alternatives, and that they would demonstrate that the loss of land is unavoidable. Again, in these basic procedural safeguards, in this case that apply to everybody, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, Canada has failed basic human rights protections. And I see this applies to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike. This same standard would apply to the non-Indigenous landowners, for example. But international human rights standards recognize that because of the history of colonialism, the history of marginalization, the history of displacement, the history of impoverishment that has been forced on Indigenous peoples, that a higher standard, a more rigorous standard of protection is always needed when we're talking about something that could impact the ability of people to live on the land, the ability of people to maintain and pursue their culture. So if we could advance the screen again, please. And then one more click, I think, or two more clicks. That standard of protection in international law, that high standard of protection, that rigorous standard of protection needed for the rights of Indigenous peoples is a really simple one. It's the standard of asking Indigenous peoples what they want. It's a standard of accepting that Indigenous people should have a say over their own futures. It's accepting that projects should not go ahead without the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. And at the end of the day, when we say this is a threat to fundamental human rights, you can disregard everything else that I've said. The basic test you can ask is, what are the First Nations saying? And since they're saying no, as Canadians committed to human rights, we have to say no as well. You've heard that these issues are before the courts. And these will be some of the most important court cases to go forward, because they're going to pick up the standards that were raised, the standards that were set in that Sokoteen decision, and they're going to take it that next step. These are decisions that go to the fundamental issue of whether this is a country that abides by the rule of law, whether this is a country that abides by its international human rights commitments or not. And these cases deserve your support. Thank you very much.
This is an amazing room full of people. I was listening to the hush that received Chief Roland's words and Elder George's word, and all the powerful speakers. You have been very open-hearted and open-minded and just holding the space for them. So I wish to appreciate the audience. Thank you. It's been a long evening, but a very rich evening. We are drawing to a close. We will close with a few words from a Coast Salish elder, as we started with the Coast Salish. Please join me in welcoming Talas from the Cowichan tribes.
Hoitka, Yatiam, Fia. My Indian name is Talas. It's passed down to me from my grandfather, the late Johnny Daniels at Salmona, the Cowichan tribes. That's who I am, where I come from. I was really compelled to speak because I want to raise my hands to Cheryl, to the chiefs, to George, and all the speakers for what we're trying to do is save the environment, save our lives, when it comes down to it. I want to talk about spirituality and our ancestors that George mentioned. My Indian name is Celeste. We talk about our ancestors. Given the fact that the science and technology they talk about genes. My name could go back thousands of years. We don't know, because we never know. There's a song that we sing just to call our ancestors to be with us, to help us, to guide us, so that we may be able to speak with one voice, to be able to pray and guide us to do the right thing. That was the teaching for our elders. And also I want to mention about the elders. At a certain age, in my middle age, I was sitting in the big house. All the elders sit down at the front. Younger people sit up at the back. My grandfather looked up. He pointed, sit beside him. There was a time in our lives when our elders knew when you were ready. They called you to sit with them. It was called the eldership training. It's about a 10-year period. When I sat with my elder, he looked at me, he said, "Grandson, you're going to sit, you're going to learn, you're going to listen." I felt like a little boy beside him. And I started to learn and went back to my culture, because I'm a recovering alcoholic of 44 years now. I was very fortunate I was taught by the elders. And another elder looked at me and said, "You get up and speak. You get up and speak." He said that 4 times. I thought, geez, I better get up there. And that was the teachings. Don't be afraid. And I call on each and every one of you to get up and speak. Speak against what this government is doing. Don't be afraid. Even if you don't get up and speak, when you vote, you're voicing your opinion. You're speaking that way. So you get up and vote. What this government's doing, the provincial and the federal government, what they're doing to the land and the sea and the air is devastating. I hate to think what my grandchildren are going to have to grow up in. People have got to stand up and speak and do something to stop this madness. These big corporations, they own the government. If Harper passes that bill, C-1551, we'll be terrorists just because we're speaking here against things like this. People got to realize and wake up and stand up and fight against it. We can't let that happen. So get up and vote. It's time. I've seen a friend of mine, Jack Fraser, the member of the opposition. Are you still here, Jack? I guess not, he left. And I'm surprised there's no politicians here other than that I know of. So I want to raise my hands again to each and every one of you, to the elders, the chiefs, to George, and I hope you can say a closing prayer when I'm finished. So again, I raise my hands to all of you. And it's time to say enough is enough.
Hi again. Before George comes up, I just want to say that we haven't had a chance to look at all the money in this pot, but this is what you've done. There's well over $1,000 here, probably close to $2,000. I have no idea how much, but thank you, thank you, thank you, and we're not going to stop until those court cases are won, and especially thank you, Chief Roland Wilson and Elder George Desjardins and everybody who came out. This is how you do it, Elder. This is how you do it. This is how we part of the way we stand up. I hate asking for money, but thank you, thank you, thank you.